Yo, what's going on, guys, and welcome back. Today my friend Rob brought over his Fujifilm X-T3, so we're going to have a little bit of fun today. I'm going to play with the ability to shoot in 4K at 60 frames per second, which my M50 can't, and it also actually has what they call F-Log built in. Now, we're going to compare that to what I do, which is I downloaded a C-Log file, put it into my pictures profile. Now, I usually don't use it, I just use neutral because I found that the C-Log file or the CineStyle file that I use just added more noise when I color graded. But today, to try to make it even, I'm going to use the C-Log profile. We're going to shoot at 1080p at 60 frames per second with the M50, since that's the highest resolution that I can shoot at and have 60 frames per second. And again, we're going to use my friend Rob's X-T3 shooting at 60 frames per second in 4K, and we're going to just compare and contrast how color grading and shooting with the two is. We're going to use his kit lens with his, which I forget what the millimeters are. I think it's like 16 to 70. Don't quote me on that. And then we're going to use the 11 to 22 millimeter lens on the Canon M50. So let's go ahead and have some fun with some of the shots and see what they look like. Took shots with Rob's Fuji and my M50. We shot up over at the cliffs. Now we're going to the moss place for moss shots. Stay tuned. I was found here. You come around here. Been exploring jumbo, running around using the X-T3 and the M50, mine in 1080p 60 frames, his in 4K 60 frames, both running F-Log and C-Log or log profiles respective to the camera. And we went to the moss spot, took some moss shots, went up to the ridge. Wasn't much going on out there. I did see a what I think was a red-tailed hawk, but he was far off in the distance. I'll show you some of those pictures, but he was way off, so they're not much. But we did get some shots, so it's going to be fun to get home, open up Premiere Pro, and see what the differences are between the footage from the Fujifilm X-T3 and the Canon M50. So after getting home and messing with both the footages from the Fujifilm and the Canon M50 in Premiere Pro, the first thing that shot out at me was really the biggest difference in the color science between the two cameras. There was a really big difference, and it seemed like Fuji definitely seemed to lean further towards the green side or yellow side of things, and I had to kind of add some of the magenta back to it, and I did the best that I could as far as trying to get the colors to match up between the Canon M50 and the Fuji. I definitely noticed a big difference in the ability to flex the colors or flex the darks or the brightnesses in the Fuji, which is to be expected since it's 10-bit versus the M50's 8-bit. So I definitely noticed a big difference in flexibility and changing the colors, which was nice. I still kind of think I might slightly prefer the color that just comes out of my Canon, because I found myself adding slight saturation to my Canon and then trying to match the Fujifilm colors over towards that, because that's what I felt looked a little bit more natural out of the box. Again, I shot both of these in log format and then color graded them. Again, being able to shoot in 4K 60 frames per second is really awesome. That allows for me to just be able to crop and do so many different things with that footage. But it just also, what I did was, the timeline that I'm shooting in is in 1080, but I have shot some of these things in 4K with the Fuji, and then these are downscaled to 1080 to fit the timeline, which just makes it look extra sharp, extra crispy, and I can definitely see the difference. I'm going to say that my M50 lens really doesn't compare to the kit lens that came with the Fuji. The footage that's coming out of that lens is definitely sharper than what the 11 to 22 EFM is, but that may not be a fair comparison considering the EFM lens is so much cheaper, as well as the camera body is cheaper. So maybe next time Willie will put the Fuji up against my RP, and maybe that'll be a little bit more of a fair comparison since they're a little closer in the price range anyway. But it's what the cameras that I had out there, both APS-C sensors. So at least if somebody's thinking about, whether they want the M50 or the Fuji, they can kind of see the differences that you can expect when working in Premiere Pro. Now, as far as using the two different cameras, my opinions are going to be biased here because all the cameras that I've ever used since I started getting into photography were Canon cameras. So I'm really used to Canon's menu systems, and I'm really used to the way that the Canon cameras are set up at this point. The Fuji, to me, seemed like a more old school kind of a setup. Everything's physical dials. The aperture is a physical dial on the lens itself. So it's not necessarily a bad thing as much as it just felt more fiddly to me. A, because I just don't know what I'm doing with that camera, right? I'm used to Canon, so I don't know what it is. But it just seems like there's so many more dials and so many more things to that camera that it's slightly more complicated to use. Just the way that the menu systems work, and even the autofocus system, and really everything about the camera feels more old school to me, where using the Canon stuff feels kind of, and this might sound bad, feels like using like a smartphone or an iPhone almost. The touch screens are almost completely like using your smartphone. I know you don't have to use those when you use your camera, but it's an availability that's there. But the way that everything is set up is just a bit more intuitive, and probably a bit more what somebody who is used to using, smartphone technology devices is used to using, versus probably somebody that's been into photography for a while and is used to some of those more old school type of setups with the cameras would probably enjoy the Fuji feel, because it's a really nice camera. It's solid. It's a really nice, cool little gadget, and you can't deny how nice the footage is. I mean, 10-bit F-Log, being able to shoot at 4K and 60 frames per second. There's a whole bunch of things that my Canon cameras can't do that it can, and it looks really nice. Depending on how important it is, how you get there, and how the experience of using your camera and shooting with your camera is a whole nother thing. And again, my opinions are probably very biased because I am extremely used to Canon, and very, very little of my time's been spent using the Fuji. It's only my second time using it, but I can't say the results are amazing. I'm definitely going to have to say that the footage is sharper, the colors are nicer. Hands down, comparing my 1080p footage using my 11 to 22 millimeter lens versus the X-T3, and I believe that's a 16 to 80 millimeter lens. I'll double check and I'll put it in here to correct myself if I'm wrong, but definitely sharper with the kit lens on the X-T3, and again the 11 to 22 is not even close to as sharp. And okay guys, I hope you enjoyed this little video. If you did, please think about going below, click the subscribe button, click the notification bell, and I'll see you guys on the next video.